so that everybody can understand. As director of the National Defense Institute, I will just say brief words, welcoming, of course, your presence in this session, and starting by congratulating the organizers of this seminar. I think it's really a wise decision, this one, of wanting to listen to a variety of stakeholders, of perspectives when being at the stage of organizing and conceptualizing this center. The second thing I would like to say is that, of course, at the National Defense Institute, we are really happy to host or co-host this event, because it matches perfectly the mission and the goals of the Institute as a hub for meeting, for gathering people, institutions, perspectives, ideas. And I think this is what happened today at this Institute during this meeting. We will listen to a variety of perspectives, concerns regarding security, suggestions for the future of the Atlantic Defense Capacity Building Center. So it was not about imposing perspectives or informing about decisions, but really willing to listen, to take account of all the ideas, the different experiences that have been here. Like in all discussions and brainstormings, of course, there are a variety of diverse ideas that will be important to identify, to evaluate, to prioritize. I think that this has been important to pave the way for the future. And the future is, of course, about defining specific action, developing proposals to boost initial cooperation, and this from this multilateral perspective that is thought to be the basis for all future work. Cooperation as a fundamental starting point to whatever will be done. So basically, beyond doing the talk, which we've been doing, it's important to walk the walk, and this is about study, this is about identifying good practices, this is about sharing information, define scenarios, and build capacities. So this is what I hope that all participants have been able to agree on, that this is the important perspective for the center. Thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure for the National Defense Institute to have this meeting, and I hope that right now we continue this developing our common cooperative work, looking at the future of this center. Thank you very much.
The conclusions of the seminar will be presented by Colonel Lemos Pires, one of the members of the Atlantic Center Working Group.
Your Excellency, Minister of National Defense, Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Togo, Excellencies, members of the government, Excellencies, Chief of Staff of the Navy and the Air Force and the Vice Chief of Army, Madam Director of the National Defense Institute, Ambassadors, Admirals, Generals, Professors, Senior Officers of Ministry of National Defense, colleagues taking part in today's seminar, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to brief you on the major conclusions that we took today. And of course, to be brief in so many recommendations is not going to be an easy task. But just to say that the objectives we had, it was to enhance common understanding and consolidate the concept we had for this Atlantic Center. So the first message, and this was cross-line for everyone that interviewed here, we're talking about the whole Atlantic, the entire Atlantic. North to south, south to north, we're talking about from Sea of Labrador to Cape Town, we're talking about Norwegian Sea down to the Strait of Magellan. So we don't want to think about this Atlantic Center without thinking about the whole, the complete Atlantic. There is no south, there is no north, there is only an Atlantic. The second big training message was avoid unnecessary duplications. We don't want to create another center to duplicate other ideas and other initiatives. So to be inclusive and with other international organizations like UN, NATO, EU, African Union, CPLP and others. We talk about common threats, common community and common goals. Let me elaborate in each of these three words defined by common. Common threats. The training was, there is a mother of all threats, it's climate change. This was agreed by the majority of the participants. And because of climate change, many of the other threats come together, talking about increase in fishing resources, energy, migration, transnational organized crime, of course talking about pollution, and we're talking about desertification, and all of that affects security. And another trending mark that everybody talked about is threats coming from sea to land, land to sea, one mirror the other. We cannot look at this just in one direction. We have to look at the problems at the maritime posture, but of course coming land to sea and sea to land. Another thing that was elaborated here was about Azores. Azores, meaning that it was an excellent location to start this Center of Excellency because of climate observatory. It's placed in a very unique position in the Atlantic. So it's a very good choice because it's also a bridge. Second word, common community. We're talking about a common Atlantic community. So nobody is more important than the other. We're talking about 66 coastal countries that have to bring together their own interests and their common goals. And what are the common goals? To build something like research, monitor, survey, building long-standing strategies. And this phrase was used for many of the participants. Strategies not for the next 5 years, but for the next 30 years. We need to think about strategies for the future of the Atlantic. Help people and people, human security, human, looking at the citizen in all the coastal states, that is very important. Another discussion that came to bear was about the name. And one thing that is consensus is Atlantic Center is enough for many of the people here. So without putting more adjectives like defense or security or capacity, defense building, many of the participants insisted that talking about Atlantic Center. Another important thing is we need a narrative, we need a storytelling, we need to tell the story very easily so everybody can understand. We need to protect people, we need to have really an effective capacity building people. So, proposal for many of the participants, we need to organize this center in 3 tiers. First tier is a think tank to produce 3 things: to research, to deliver strategies, and to deliver policies. A second tier will be, of course, of a platform, to either a more inclusive platform to make everybody available to discuss issues that are common for all. And the third tier is the capacity building concept, the capacity building center that we want to provide. In the second workshop, we talked specifically about the Gulf of Guinea as a study case for what we're talking about. And there is a lot of issues connected with the Gulf of Guinea and surrounding issues like violent extremism. We're talking about smuggling, terrorism, crime. We're talking about uprisings that come from situations that are not controlled. We're talking about engaging civil society as a need to do. We're talking about the complexity of organizations in the Gulf of Guinea. We're talking about the need of interagency, the deconfliction, and convergence, all words that were used by many of the participants. We need, of course, to look at resources. Without capabilities, there is no way we can talk about strategies. So we have to have capacity and capabilities on the coastal countries in the area so they can deliver what they are asked to do. And then a lot of recommendations for this Atlantic Center. This Atlantic Center should be a platform for research, should be a research that would look country by country, region by region, and then as a whole. It will be very useful to have sharing a capability for data, information, and situational awareness. It will be the need for collective security, arrangements, and agreements. This center could be a platform to start discussions about arrangements and agreements to talk about collective security in the area. Illegal fishing, sea land continuing, already talked about this one. And to deliver, the last year, a pool of well trainers. So as a deliverable of an output of this center to produce a pool of well trainers. So needs. The need that was highlighted was to speak holistically about defense and security and safety and development. So the message from all of the participants is do not separate these words. Do not talk about defense, security, safety, and development. We have to have an holistic approach, a comprehensive approach, and talk about all of them together because it only makes sense if you have the wider perspective. Again, civilian military cooperation, public-private cooperation, IO, NGO cooperation. All of these have to stand together if we want to make the difference. Good examples of capacity building. It was given the example of the Portuguese Navy acting in São Tomé and Príncipe. And that is real, what we can call capacity building enhancement that in the end brings the word trust. And the word trust was one of the words that was used a lot. We need to build trust among partners, trust among countries, so when we trust each other, we can go and deliver the products. Deal with the different architectures, and of course, defense capacity building is very important, but it's only part of the wider effort. It has to be thought to our long-time achievements. We're talking about building narratives for 15, 25, 30 years, not longer than that. And last but not the least, the following days of these seminars, we will try to merge all of these conclusions, Mr. Minister, and we will try to make the systematization of the international information we gathered today. And we're going to have a shared vision that we're going to share with all the participants to look at what the future of the Atlantic Central is. At the end of the day, our only purpose is to help keeping the Atlantic a space of peace and prosperity for the people in an increasingly unstable world. Thank you, sir.
I now invite His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation and African Integration of Togo, Professor Robert Ducé, to present his keynote address.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Dear João, Minister of Defense of Portugal, Mr. Secretary of State of Defense of Portugal, dear Professor, Director of the National the Atlantic Defense Center of Portugal, all protocol observed, Excellencies, Ambassador. I would like to express my gratitude to my friend, Professor João, for inviting me this afternoon in Lisbon. And I would like to congratulate the director and all the members of staff of the Atlantic Defense Center of Portugal. When I listened to your report about what you did this morning, I would like to take my time to discuss, to share with you a little bit the issue about maritime security in Gulf of Guinea. You know, lying to the west of the African continent, the Gulf of Guinea is a complex maritime space faced with multiplex security challenges. This area extending from Cameroon to Liberia, I think so, because you have the expert in this here, expecting from Cameroon to Liberia in full of constantly busy lines of communication and friends transportation, and he is therefore the bedrock of the vitality of our port facilities in West African region particularly. The huge natural resources and economic potential of the maritime area are an essential lever for the development of a blue economy in all its dimensions. This vital space for ourselves and for the rest of the world tends to become a favorite place, as you know, for criminal activities, all kinds, in particular piracy, armed robbery, terrorism, poaching, trafficking in drugs, illegal fishing, and dumping of toxic waste and oil spills, etc. In the face of recurrent threats to maritime safety in the Gulf of Guinea in recent years, the African and international maritime community has mobilized to provide the most effective response possible. We have, as you know, 2 or 3 UN resolutions against terrorism in maritime insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. We had, as you know, the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, and of course, the Lomé Charter for against maritime insecurity in Gulf of Guinea or in all African country. Gulf of Guinea, as you know, is unfortunately under the control of the terrorism group or the pirates group. Despite the exceptional result achievement is in deterring piracy, lowering our guard would be detrimental to our economy. I cite as evidence some recent data which you know as well as I do. Indeed, with an increase of nearly 76% in armed attacks against ships between 2015 and 2016. The Gulf of Guinea remains the epicenter of global piracy, according to the report published by one of Future Foundation. The report counts 19,500 incidents related to piracy in the Gulf of Guinea in 2016, against 54 in 2015. During the year 2016, according to the statistic released by the International Maritime Bureau, out of 196 cases registered worldwide, 57 are recorded by the Gulf of Guinea, which is 30% of the world total. West African alone recorded 39 cases, or 68% of total piracy incidents in relation of the Gulf of Guinea. The report counts 5 incidents related to piracy in the Gulf of Guinea in 2016. In 2016, piracy attacks at the sea have increased worldwide in 2018, driven by a surge of piracy in the Gulf of Guinea. Indeed, according to the IMB, 201 attacks were recorded in 2018, compared with 180 in 2017. From 2009 to 2018, there were, I think, more than 300 cases of piracy in the Gulf of Guinea. During the same period, in my country, in Togo, we try to do our best, and we recorded 8 cases of piracy, and proportion of nearly 3% of total attacks recorded in all countries of the Gulf of Guinea. To these statistics, we must add the recent, unfortunately, attacks recorded in the territorial water of Cameroon on Thursday. It was, I think, 15th of August this year. The last November 2nd, this month, we have the same attack of the port of Cotonou. And unfortunately for us, or for me in Togo, this on November 4th, when I visited the Portuguese first warship in Togo. The same date, November 4th, we had the piracy attack in the Togolese port. So your ship was in the Togolese waters. That's why I say unfortunately for us, but we are trying to do our best. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think the reduction of this threat is primarily the result of close cooperation between the navies present in the area. In your report, dear Colonel, you say we need to go to the sharing information between the navies and all the actors who working against maritime insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. In this dynamics, it is planned to establish a coordination zone. We have the coordination zone in our region. We have a coordination zone, we say zone F and G, like the Maritime Operational Center of zone E of the ECOWAS, whose regional center is located in Cotonou, Benin. It included Niger, Nigeria, Benin, and my country, Togo. We have a zone F, will include the following countries as Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Sierra Leone, while Cabo Verde, Gambia, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, and Senegal will be part of Zone G. In Togo, we have a plan for the establishment of a second naval base near in Lomé, the capital of Togo. And we think, to conclude my remarks, we need to think about a new vision, a new security vision in Gulf of Guinea. Because now we have another problem, another security issue in our region. We have, as you know, the terrorism group inside in the West African side in continent. So if you see yourself as you are the experts, we have inside in the continent the terrorism group. In Mali, in Burkina Faso, they are coming in our coast. We have our country like Ghana, Togo, Benin. We have, of course, Boko Haram in the north-east of Nigeria. If we don't work together, if we don't strengthen our cooperation, the military cooperation, Gulf of Guinea will be a dangerous region for all our maritime activities in this region. Thank you so much, dear Joao, for your invitation. Thank you, Madam Professor. Thank you for everybody. Bye.
To conclude this section, we will now hear from His Excellency, the Minister of National Defense, Professor João Gomes Cravinho.
Good afternoon, dear Minister for Foreign Affairs of Togo, Professor Robert Dussey, Senhora Diretora do Instituto de Defesa Nacional, Senhor Secretário de Estado Adjunto de Defesa Nacional, Senhor Chefe de Estado-Maior da Armada e da Força Aérea, Senhores Deputados, Almirantes, Oficiais Generais, Senhores Embaixadores, Senhores Dirigentes do Ministério de Defesa Nacional, Minhas Senhoras e Meus Senhores, Ladies and Gentlemen. So after today's intensive work and following up on the excellent keynote address from my good friend, Minister Robert Dussey, my task is an easy one in just addressing a few closing words to the audience. Two key messages for this short address from me. Firstly, I want to thank all of those who have been involved in making this seminar a success. And secondly, I want to reiterate why it is that Portugal, through the Ministry of National Defense, is invested in bringing this Atlantic Center for Defense Capacity Building to life. But first then, a few words of thanks to our hosts at the National Defense Institute, Professor Helena Carreiras. Thank you for making the space available. Thank you for joining our reflections on the Atlantic. This is a topic that this institute has been following for several decades in different guises. And of course, there are several valuable partnerships across the Atlantic which this institute cherishes and which enhance the profile of our activities here. The second acknowledgement is to all of our invitees and to our guests, especially those who took part as presenters during today's roundtables. Your insights, your perspectives, and knowledge have helped us immensely in fine-tuning our ideas about the center, and we expect to continue working with this community of knowledge and indeed enlarging it in future activities of the Atlantic Center. So to everyone attending this open session, we are very pleased to share with you this initiative, and your presence here today is proof of the widespread interest that the Atlantic Center is already gathering. And I can say that in many conversations with colleagues, defense ministers from Atlantic countries, I have been able to witness the interest, curiosity, the enthusiasm for this initiative. Thank you in particular to Robert Dussey for bringing us a West African perspective to this closing at least closing moment. This is fundamental for the topics that we are engaging in. This kind of cooperative dialogue with partners from across the Atlantic, north and south and east and west of the Atlantic, is fundamental. This is what makes sense, what gives sense to this center. So we want to build on this kind of interactivity, absorb it, use it, and the comments from Colonel Lemspich summarizing aspects of today's debates have, I think, already given plenty of justification for this interactive approach as a manner of consolidating the way in which we want this center to operate. And the final word of appreciation is very much due to all of those in the Ministry of Defense who made this ambitious seminar a reality in a fairly short amount of time. Thank you for all your dedication over the past few months, particularly to the Deputy Director for National Defense Policy, Colonel Lemspich, for his personal dedication to overseeing all the aspects of this seminar, working in close partnership with Professor Licínia Simão from my office. So thank you to all of those who were involved. On to the second point. Why is Portugal interested in promoting this notion? Why is Portugal interested in leading efforts to bring countries together in the context of this future multinational center dedicated to enhancing defense capacities in the Atlantic? Well, the first reason is that we have actually already been working for some decades with partners in different regions of the Atlantic on enhancing defense capabilities. We very much value the bilateral, the multilateral relationships, which for us are sites of generating a mutual commitment. So they are locations that in our activities we use for sharing views and practices which are essential for the development of joint reference frameworks that can help us to address common challenges. We understand the relevance of these kinds of tools for making national sovereignty effective. It's one of the paradoxes of our times that sovereignty is best achieved and practiced through partnerships, and in fact is not achievable without partnerships. As far as the Atlantic is concerned, of course, we are very keen to promote these partnerships because without the exercise of state authority at sea in different manners, none of us benefit from the safety, the security that we all need from this Atlantic Ocean that we share. So for us, these moments of dialogue and interaction can assume multiple forms through our bilateral defense cooperation, through our commitment to the CPLP, the Community of Portuguese-Speaking Countries, but also in our capacity as a founding member of NATO, in our capacity as a member of the European Union, in our capacity as a promoter of dialogue with the African Union, with ECOWAS, with all institutions that are of relevance for this region. And Portugal, of course, also has its own national interests in this cooperation. I firmly believe that cooperative security is an essential basis for our defense posture. We rely on the notion of cooperative security for the establishment of our defense posture. We believe, and we act on this by sending troops we believe that our own defense is best secured sometimes thousands of kilometers away from home. So we have a clear interest looking at the Atlantic and looking in particularly at the Gulf of Guinea and the challenges in the Sahel, for example. We have a clear interest in fighting the extremism that feeds instability into several parts of the Atlantic region. We have a clear interest in learning with others, in sharing best practices to respond, for example, to disasters and to humanitarian emergencies, either man-made or resulting from extreme natural phenomena. The Atlantic actually has numerous vulnerabilities in this regard, and Portugal is not immune to these. At sea, we want to protect trade routes, ours and those of others. We want to have a clear understanding of the threats that exist, for example, to our underwater communications lines. We want to make sure that our natural resources are managed in a sustainable and responsible manner. So in all of these areas, we have a clear national interest in promoting mechanisms that can lead to the joint protection of global commons. But the second reason for Portugal being interested in setting up this center, we are deeply committed to keeping the Atlantic as an area of cooperation and of dialogue. So an area of freedom of action, an area of opportunities for human development. Neither Portugal nor any other state on its own, of course, can hope to make much progress on these goals. These goals are far too ambitious. The Atlantic Ocean is far too vast. It is absolutely necessary, if we are to come anywhere close to achieving our objectives, that we do so in a cooperative manner. So we have a direct interest, and also we think that it corresponds to the interest of many others, to develop mechanisms and procedures for working together in order to correspond to the interests of all. So this is the basis of our collective security, and it is why improving our defense capabilities together in this new Atlantic Center is so vitally important in our perspective. In short, what we are aiming for is to establish a platform for cooperative action that can enhance our knowledge of the tensions arising in the Atlantic, and that can study and develop shared solutions to common problems. In the institutions in which we participate, we are working intensively to focus the attention of partners and allies on the Atlantic. We have been doing so within the Atlantic Alliance, within NATO, making sure that politically the Atlantic is kept center stage, but also contributing to highlighting the centrality of the Açores in this context. And I can say that we have clearly noticed a renewed strategic centrality for the Atlantic Ocean for NATO in the recent past, in the past year or two. Within the European Union, we have been supporters of the EU's maritime strategy, and we are well aware that the EU efforts to work in the Gulf of Guinea in cooperation with African partners are producing important results and improving the security there. The upcoming Portuguese presidency of the European Union in 2021 is providing us with an opportunity to update the Union's maritime security strategy, as well as to deepen the EU's contribution to the stabilization of several countries in Africa, a goal to which Portugal actively contributes with its military men and women. The case, for example, in Mali, in the Central African Republic, but also in Somalia, on the other side of the African continent. This will be, as many of you will know, this will be the first priority of the Portuguese presidency of the European Union in 2021, the development of a closer, enhanced, and qualitatively superior relation between the European Union and the African continent. We also have upcoming in June of 2020, the United Nations Oceans Conference here in Lisbon. It's another important opportunity to showcase the centrality of the Atlantic and the many challenges that we face. And in this years, not years, 3 years, because it took a long time, we celebrate the 5th centenary of the first circumnavigation of the world by Fernando Magalhães and Sebastiano Elcano. We want to highlight the interdependent nature of our political communities, which became apparent for the first time with that historic voyage. So we see the 5th centenary celebrations as an important opportunity for looking towards the next decades, not only looking to what happened in the past. So in all of these and other initiatives, we see added value for the future Atlantic Center, and we are working to create synergies that can help the center to develop its initial activities within the framework of existing cooperation mechanisms that Portugal has. This center, it's a Portuguese initiative, but it does not wish to remain a Portuguese national center. It aims to be, from the beginning, a multinational center, and this seminar has helped, I think, to make this clear. Portugal is an Atlantic country. It has its own vision for the Atlantic. But our greatest ambition regarding the Atlantic Ocean is that the center should work as a facilitator for fruitful dialogue leading to significant security cooperation and to defense capacity building. So we believe that being an active partner, working in the midst of other partners, is the best way to fulfill our responsibility as a security provider in the Atlantic. We are well aware of the diversity of views, of the asymmetries in the vast Atlantic space, but we also believe strongly that we share an interest in making sure that our security is enhanced through sharing best practices, through making knowledge available, through cooperative platforms that facilitate common learning and action where shared interest is clear. And I very much look forward to reading the conclusions. We've had a taste already of them, the conclusions from today's work, and to continuing the mini dialogues about around this Atlantic Center, which I've had the pleasure of working on with several partners. As we are planning to have the first training activity of the Atlantic Center during the first semester of 2020 in the island of Terceira in the Açores, I would like to extend a wish that all of those present should continue to be engaged in this initiative to nurture this young institution and to follow and contribute to its activities throughout its life. To many of you, I hope, I can say, see you next year in the Açores. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presence and for your attention. The seminar is now closed. Have a nice day.